Hello friends, welcome to my channel. So, I have been hired by this Japanese company, and I thought I'd share my experience there. I am writing a journal, and even if I have been there for less than 10 business days, I'm already working long hours, so I'll write as often as I can. I want to share with you how my interview went and my first days there. Boy, you have no idea the bunch of winner I am working with. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. So I was initially shortlisted for a job outside Japan, at a big company, but was instead offered one here. I was to meet the CEO of the Japan branch for an interview last week. As I made my way to the meeting with him, I found myself walking through one of Tokyo's bustling business district. As you know, autumn is almost there, now that we have lost a good 10 degrees since the last rainy day. The soothing warmth that embraced the air made my walk between the train station and the offices extremely pleasant, though. Now that I am recording this, I realize I haven't felt that good since I joined the company. I entered the building and found the company floor without too much difficulty. Once there, I was greeted extremely politely by two women. They both wore their hair long and straight, discolored by the same 2 or 3 shades. But they could not look more different to one another. The first one was dressed and styled like the average teenager you could see on the posters in Donkey, with a longer skirt and, well, an extra 30 years. She was wearing a white top with a lace-filled collar and a pink pastel skirt. She had a heavy layer of foundation that was too light for her skin tone. You will find out why in detail later, but her nickname is Chucky. The second woman had a noticeably slim figure. She adorned herself in tight-fitting attire, and her neck always seemed to be tensed. She had clearly undergone cheek fillers. Additionally, her eyes appeared unnaturally wide, revealing that she had likely undergone eyelid surgery many years ago. Despite these enhancements, she exuded an air of maturity that set her apart from Chucky. For convenience, we will call her Barbie. So, Barbie took me to what looked like a boardroom, served me tea, and then started to bombard me with questions in Japanese, with a fake big smile. Some of the questions were subtly phrased, designed to extract personal information from me. I can't remember all of them, but I do remember that she cold started without even introducing herself with, "How old are you? How long have you been in Japan? Did you came with your husband or your uncle? Where did you learn Japanese? How long do you plan to stay in Japan?" I chose to offer vague responses, or simply disregarded her questions when they crossed boundaries. Barbie finally left the room after telling me that the CEO was going to be here any minute now. I thanked her and sipped my tea as she left. I took a moment to enjoy the view while waiting for the CEO to meet me. Less than 5 minutes later, the door opened. And it was Barbie again. She pretended to clean the tray where my tea was served and started asking me the very same questions again. It was a strange thing to do. I couldn't help but wonder if she had some sort of cognitive impairment. It felt like those movies when you relive the same scene twice. Clearly, I wasn't in a movie, so it meant that she did not ask those questions just out of curiosity. She was supposed to get specific personal information from me and was sent back, no matter if she looked like a fool. As my personal life was still not her business, I gave her the same treatment and ended with a, "Sorry, I'm so bad at speaking Japanese." She replied with the fakest giggle I had seen and heard in my entire life, and she left the room again. Then entered the CEO. He was wearing a very beautiful suit, obviously handmade for him, with a fabulous fabric. I was secretly betting in my head that he had spent some time in the UK before, or that he was a fan of it. I was right. He politely greeted me with a fairly cute Japanese-British accent. He was also obviously wearing a wig, in the most untidy way I have ever saw, which I found cool, because I like statement pieces. I stood up and bowed. He smiled and nicely blinked to let me know that it was not going to be necessary. I was relieved, and genuinely smiled back. We shook hands. Perhaps, did I think, the company was so domestic after all, and the tentative investigation from Barbie was just her being a weird, inquisitive person. Back to my meeting! The CEO was looking at me with a forced smile. He remained silent for a few seconds. There was something about the way he presented himself engaged me before speaking. It was very unusual for someone of his position. He gave me the impression that he was representing the entire nation of Japan, and I could feel that was welcoming me with great caution, still trying to figure out if I was here to shake the boat. The interview started. He talked a bit about the company, nothing that I did not find online. In roughly less than 1 minute, he started to drop big names at the firm. I started to feel sorry for him, that he needed to do this in front of someone who had the age of his son. I then wanted to ask some questions about the company, my role, my objectives, to show interest in the firm I was about to join. It is generally a good thing to do in interviews. Well, not in this company. I would find out soon. After hearing my first question, he kept on smiling but looked annoyed. To answer my questions, or should I say, to put an end to them, he gave me a cryptic response with a slightly clenched jaw. He told me that if I worked here, there were most certainly things to build, but that I would need to get used to half-cooked things. In other words, he told me not to expect to achieve anything. And there we go. Was I thinking, domestic company it is. It seems insignificant, but there was a big red flag here that I will develop in the debrief video, which should already be online by now. Now back to the interview. The interview went on, and to be honest, the more I was listening to what he said and what he was obviously trying to do, the more I felt sorry for him, because I expected someone of his position and age to be a little bit more alive and interested in his own business. He was clearly in his position here because he was born in the right social class and good at politics, at least in Japan. Nothing new under the corporate sun, one would say. But man, being dignified literally costs nothing when you are a CEO. He went on and on, dropping the global company CEO name, other Japan companies' CEO names, that I stopped listening to him. For that, he has earned the nickname of the village clown. You will understand that this is the perfect name for him. Back to the interview. I was still processing how uncomfortable he made me feel, and at the exact moment I started to wonder if I was perhaps judging him harshly too quickly, I found out what surprise he had in store for me. I will never doubt my guts ever again. Before he introduced the surprise, he mentioned that I will be working with the vice president of the company, in charge of optimizing the resources. And at that exact moment, another man entered the room, another red flag, also very common in Japanese domestic companies. Did you find it? It's an easy one. Back to the interview. So, my future boss entered the room without saying hello nor smiling. He was just staring in front of him with a mix of angry and stupid expression. I also thought for a second that he was a lawyer because he was wearing a pin on the left side of his jacket. But when he came closer, I could tell it was a discolored US baseball team pin. It must have been an old collector edition. Anyone with a pulse could figure out what this guy was about in a matter of seconds. So, I will give it to you right now. He looked rich, with no education. He wore such an over-the-top suit, I did not know it was possible. He clearly wanted to show he was lifting because his expensive suit was not fitting, and it could only be on purpose. He was obviously taking supplements, and he had the biggest, ugliest watch I had even seen that he would spend his time showing, while he was obviously right-handed. He looked like a caricature of the average Wall Streeter you would see in movies. We will name him Dumbo. Back to our meeting. So, the CEO, the village clown, started to give some orders to Dumbo without even looking at him. He mumbled them so I could not catch the substance of it, but I heard the end of the sentence and could tell that he was using a very rude Japanese to address him. Dumbo was standing straight as an arrow and was not even looking at me. No one could tell he was listening to something, let alone understanding what he was being told. At some point, the village clown said goodbye to me, without a word or a glance at Dumbo, and he left the room. So I was now alone with my now boss, Dumbo. He took a seat in front of me while staring. He was so rude, but I still remained polite and said hi with a forced smile. He did not smile back at me after I greeted him, and still looked angry for no reason. At that point, I kept smiling weakly because I was frankly trying not to laugh, and it's easier to let a bit go in those moments. He asked me, "How do you know, James?" I could very easily make a phone call and find out, but he is a really busy man, and I don't want to disturb him. Excuse me, I haven't spoken with any James, I said. Oh, really? He recommended you for this job, right? He pronounced the right with a very unnecessary, exaggerated New York accent, almost yelling. He pointed at his phone and showed me his emails. I understood he was referring to Madison, the person who originally interviewed me and gave me the job in Japan, whose name, nor last name, nor middle name, was nowhere James. So, this poorly mannered Dumbo VP was not even remembering Madison's name, but he felt the need to bluff in front of me. Huh, interesting. Oh, you mean, how do I know him? I pointed at his phone and added, How do I know Mark? I asked, using a wrong name on purpose. He then said aggressively, Yes, this is what I asked. How do you know Mark? He repeated one more time, the wrong name I baited him into. He then continued, Because I am like Mark's son, but I am not going to call him just for you. So you need to tell me, how do you know him? He added. I could not believe that he thought his game was convincing. I could not believe that I found that the village clown sounded pathetic when he dropped names 5 minutes ago. In comparison to the village clown, Dumbo had the IQ of an aggressive spoon. But I guess it makes sense. One hired the other for a reason, I guess. I took my time and replied slowly while looking at him in the eye. Took an interview with him, he recommended me, and here I am. He glowered at me and said nothing. It was hard not to laugh after catching his eyes and look at his angry, stupid face. He had the same expression as Homer Simpson trying to lift something heavy. So do you know how to use PowerPoint? He abruptly asked. Sure thing, I replied. As you can see, I have only worked in North American companies, so I did a lot of PowerPoint presentations. I added, trying not to laugh even harder. While there was definitely no one home, some lights showed in his eyes, and he smiled for the first time when he heard the mention to North America. He then switched to Japanese and said, Are you still single? Figure out quickly if you want to get married or have a career. We don't have your time. After you have proved yourself, we will manage your career. I was so shocked, but I kept my smile. It felt like he just slapped me in the face, though, and tried to dress more professionally. This is Japan, he added. With his hand, he pointed in direction of my chest. It took a second for me to get it, but seriously, fat the wuck. I was wearing a neatly zipped dark office shirt and a blazer, but he still managed to refer to the fact that I have a rather generous breast, something I could do nothing about. Charming. This was not even the appetizer of his bullying. Before talking about my first professional interactions at work with him, I need to brief you on Dumbo for a minute. We will go through his intellectual prowess one by one in due course, but there are few things about him I can let you know now. His life goal is to look like what he thinks American people look like. He starts 80% of his sentences by, in the USA, and he will lick your boots if you come from there. He actually hire a native English speaker in his team, so he has someone to whom he can speak with in front of everyone at the office and look like he is one of them. In exchange, he has no work expectation from his native speaker underlying. He also uses them to write his emails in English for him and to represent him in meeting outside Japan. He boasts that he smokes M because it should be legal, like it will be soon in the USA. So you got it. His personal branding is that he is an American boy and therefore tries to look cool California way, all of which would be fine if he was not just only this at work and using the company resources to fund his wife's NGO and throw lavish parties to brand themselves as American expats living in Japan. They subscribe to every club that has the name American on it. And we have all heard someone complaining about how people like him hijack those spaces to parade their new money with very bad taste there. He lived in the USA for years. He even secretly got naturalized. He went to high school in the USA and at a university ranked in around 400s, where money is a necessary and sufficient condition to get in. But yet he has a very limited English level, which does not pose any issues in Japan, as he can have people write his emails in English for him. What was funny, though, was to listen to him conducting meetings with people of the Japan branch. He would use an American accent in a way that foreign kids would do if they wanted to caricature it, but he was always dead serious. He would often yell at fellow Japanese employees in English and scream the F word for more effect, and was, every time, enjoying himself, thinking he looked like and sounded like some sort of Harvey Specter in front of Japanese employees. They, the Japanese employees, were too afraid to say anything. Many told me that they did not understand why he would act out this way, as he was born and raised in Japan and was treating them as the very evil version of a typical Japanese manager anyway. He would master the pronunciation of a limited number of generic sentences in English, and he would use them to lead meetings, lead meaning asking people to start talking. But as soon as he had to derive from his automated script, the Japanese accent came back. Which, understand me, is totally okay, but it was fun to listen to, as he was talking down to anyone who was not an English native speaker and saying absolutely horrible things about non-white foreigners. He would conclude all his meeting by giving the only guidance he was capable to give his teams, which was, "Have a plan, guys, because if you don't have a plan, things will not be good, you know." And then he would leave, probably persuaded that he nailed it, American way. What was more surprising was that he had a very low level of Japanese, given that he skipped high school in Japan. It was very hard to understand him. Some employees even told me in confidence that they could not understand all of his emails, and that they often had to talk to him in person to fully understand what he meant. He also had no idea what he is doing for the company. For real, he took a day off every time a request came from the headquarter office, and he forced junior employees to understand the request and do the heavy lifting. Made sense, as his only job was to be the puppy and the fuse of the village clown. After all, hiring someone as stupid as him can be very convenient when all your suppliers are friends and family. But we will talk about this later. The truth is that everyone sees it, but no one says anything because who will do that in a Japanese company? Back to our story. 2 weeks later, I am seated in the office of Dumbo, who is now effectively my boss. He had asked to see me. This was my third or second day, and I already could not stand to even look at him. You will get a grasp of why in a minute. I just feel like he slapped me in the face again. "So, are you English? Like for real?" He'd just asked me. "I was born and raised there. So were my parents. I don't understand your question." Big silence in the room. He had stood up and was putting his jacket on, while turning his back on me. "You are not so, white," he finished shamelessly, and then faced me. I had nothing to say, so I just stared at him. I had no way to prove this, the same way I had no way to prove what he told me at the interview. I thought it could not get any worse than that, but then remembered that he specifically called me in his office. So I waited. He then changed the subject. "Look, we are going to be sending an email to inform that you have joined and will be working for me. Have you met Stephen, my guy?" "Yes, very nice guy. Can you remind me what's his job?" I was being polite because he did not tell me anything. "Unlike yours, it's very clear. He will be my right hand. He will learn the ropes with me and hopefully one day become a great leader. He comes from the Boo. You know the Boo? It's—" "Yes, in California. In the US," I replied with a forced smile. He stupidly smiled back. I looked at him with a feeling of despair for a second. I really cannot say that I am 100% sure, but I swear I heard that Boo thing in an American soap on Wall Street or Lawyer I watched when I was a kid. To this day, I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue. "Anyway," Dumbo continued, as if he was teaching me astrophysics, "Stephen arrived 2 weeks before you, but I wanted to send an email with you together because I cannot put you on the same level." I wanted to ask why, even though I perfectly knew the answer. "Am I going to have to send you my bio?" I asked instead. "No need," he abruptly replied. He quickly changed the topic. "So, I'm going to have a meeting now, and I would like you to attend," he said with an imperious tone. "All right, let me grab my laptop," I mumbled. "Won't be necessary, he replied. "Just sit here." I did not like the way he talked to me. Since my first moments in the company, He only gave me micro orders and would warn me few seconds before a meeting instead of putting me in the loop to receive invites, like all participants. It was the second time he would do that, but this was a very light taste of what was coming. He was doing this on purpose to send a message to me and to everyone at the firm that I did not matter. Back to my story. It was noon. The meeting started. I listened and I took notes. Someone was sharing their screen, so we were watching Dumbo's computer. He then started a chat with his secretary and asked her to pick up food for him. 10 minutes later, she brought him a sandwich and water during the meeting, which he ate like a pig, and then used a toothpick noisily, still like a pig. He reminded me of a very vulgar mafia guy, eating with no manners in front of someone, to show dominance. He was clearly being rude to me. I was very hungry, but how glad I was not to have to eat in front of this disgusting spectacle. He told me that this is how you eat in the USA. In front of a computer. What a loser. I could not believe I worked so hard to get an education, come to Japan, and make my dream come true to work here, to only have to watch an overprivileged, misogynist, and racist clown living his fake American dream in his sad office. When the meeting came to an end, I stood up to leave the room without a word, and while he made perfectly clear he did not enjoy my company, he spit some last words that he clearly physically needed to say before I left. Haven't you noticed? I'm always talking about my GOP. It's like the GOP in the US. People tell me I sound like I'm in charge of half of the US politics. Funny, I replied, without laughing, nor wanting to laugh this time. What a loser. I went for lunch during the 45 minutes I was allowed to be outside my desk. And when I came back, my eyes met with a Japanese man, in his 50s, who was standing between the company intercom and a ficus. He was staring at me with round eyes. I saw that he was wearing a badge from the same company, but I did not said hi because he was giving me the creep. I went back to my desk and made a detour to ask Barbie and her friend Chucky, who's the guy who entered with me. Barbie told me that he was a former consultant who now worked on general affairs. He was still staring at me. Weirdest guy I have ever saw. Hang in there, because this is just the start. Spoiler, he was not here by mistake or coincidence. I went back to my desk and found a dirty toothpick in the middle of it. Charming. Not been here even a week, and I was already wondering what on God's green earth I was doing here. Boy, if only I knew. That's it for today. That was the first part. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Again, thank you very much for watching. Cheers!